Hello. Am I audible, Pawanji?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hello, I am C. Paul Singh, President of NISPER. Right in the beginning, I welcome all of you on this international webinar, particularly countries outside India, whose timing may not be synchronizing somehow, or may not be comfortable for them, yet they have made it possible to join us and register as delegate. I am greatly thankful to them. Let me say a few words about NISPER. National Institute of Security, Safety, Management, and Applied Technology was established about 3 decades back. Initially, we started having training in these subjects only confined to the people who were managing some security agencies and private security industry. With the passage of time, we also introduced courses on fire safety and risk management. However, having confined ourselves to these spectrums or these particular competencies, we thought that we should go ahead, and recently we have established a research cell and a think tank to go into advanced research in respect of these, particularly these competencies, which are the core competencies of NISPER. In this specialization, we not only want to impart training and not only want to produce some research papers, we are also conducting in the same process some webinars in which we have invited people from international community to discuss and exchange ideas on the subjects which concern the safety, security, and risk management. Having established this center, having established the research cell, we are having an ultimate aim to become one of the global institute in the process, and we are introducing in this process certain innovative procedures, certain methods to improve not only the knowledge, but also the productivity and performance in the field of security, safety, management, applied technology. With these words about NISPER, I'd like to introduce the chairman, Mr. Pawan Ahluwalia. Mr. Pawan Ahluwalia, as is well known to most of the friends here, is actually also Captain Pawan Ahluwalia. He sought retirement quite some time back as a young captain from the daredevil regime of the para forces, but without somehow thinking even that he has a secure and very established career in front, he joined the business, and today he is one of the top businessmen in Southeast Asia and also in India as such. He has a number of companies under his belt and a very well-known businessman in the field of security management, risk mitigation, and as well as in the business world, where we are having some parameters, certain assessment bodies to undertake assessments and skill on the skill development, etc. With these words about Mr. Pawan Ahluwalia, I'll only like to write one more word, that he is a thorough gentleman, a very persuasive friend, and top of it, a very hard taskmaster as far as his employees are concerned. It doesn't mince word when he has to say something, but with all his affection, with all his persuasive capacity, despite his at times being assertive, he is able to get results for his organization. The subject of today, as we all know, is on artificial intelligence. Now, I'll say a few words about this subject and discuss and subsequently leave it for discussion to the speakers of this webinar. It was this particular subject was probably founded as a separate academic discipline in 1950. They assumed tremendous importance and lot of global attention paid to it. It has today, in the recent few years, it has assumed an importance of is assumed importance as if it's going to have something which is far beyond even human intelligence. Good that it was started to simulate human intelligence, but it seems that with the progress in this artificial intelligence, probably it may replace the human intelligence. It was started only to simulate it, but it may not replace human intelligence. I just said that with the passage of time, it may probably replace human intelligence. Artificial intelligence has experienced waves of optimism, waves of pessimism in all these years. Though it was meant to augment the capacities and the competencies of the human being. There are unimaginative threats also now from the AI to the human life or to the society itself. There is, of course, no harm to use digitalization for quick decisions, for quick responses, and to get quick result on the complex subjects. But it is apprehended that AI with passage of time may even obliterate the emotional thinking, family relationship, and social relationship with our society. We stand at the brink of this technical development today. We stand on the brink of this technical revolution today. There is a scope, of course. There's a tremendous scope, of course. And I feel this tremendous scope, which is available to us, if it is taken too far, it may not be dangerous for the human species. With this word, I'd like to add one or two other points that as far as its programming is concerned, it is said that it's focused on three capabilities. And the three capabilities are normally considered that you have to focus on its, particularly in the initial stage, on the quick results, as you say, and subsequently, a machine itself may become, and then a machine itself may become a learner. It may start learning, start correcting itself, and almost replace the human mind. I'm sure that nowadays, as is being said, that from the machine of learning stage, it is going to the next stage, which is called deep learning. And that deep learning means the corrective measures will be taken to the machine itself to improve its efficiency. I look forward to the speakers of today who shall deliberate on the highlights of artificial intelligence. The highlights will be, of course, it will accelerate the efficiency, definitely. It will act much faster than even human mind can. It may also have quicker decisions. It may be cost effective because human beings, it may not be a very costly resource. It may be cost effective resource. But there are also low lights that I have told you already, like lack of human emotions, like lack of, like reduction in future about human interaction, like reduction or having a reverse effect in the social life, and lack of, I will call out-of-box thinking. Out-of-box thinking is left still to the brain, human brain, whether it can, as an intelligence, artificial intelligence, can have out-of-box thinking. With these few words, I would request the moderator, the chairman, Mr. Pavanjit Ahluwalia, to take over the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for a very nice introduction. And before I begin the webinar, I'd like to thank the participants from various countries. And I just named the countries from where we have participants today. We are at the moment live on YouTube and Facebook. And we have participants from India. We have from the United States, Singapore, Nigeria, Spain, UAE, Australia, Bahrain, Bhutan, Brazil, Canada, Indonesia, Jordan, Netherlands, Romania, Saudi Arabia, Senegal, South Africa, Uganda, UK, and Vietnam. So I thank you all for taking time out and from various time zones to be here with us today. I'd also like to say a word about our president, who's Mr. Sipal Singh. He's a master's in English literature and has served the Indian police in various senior appointments across the country. He was made responsible by the government of India to raise a new force called the Rapid Action Force, and he was also its first chief. He also raised the Internal Security Academy, a central police academy in the Indian state of Rajasthan. During his service career, he was decorated with the President's Police Medal for Distinguished Service and several other distinguished awards for the services that he rendered to the government of India. After retirement, he was awarded with the Security Personality of the Year by the President of India in a global seminar held in New Delhi in the year 2009. He currently is also an advisor for the Asian Professional Security Association, and he's also the Honorary Director General for the Central Association of Private Security Industry in India and the Association of Private Detectives. Mr. Sipal Singh's face is very well known in the country as a dynamic security professional who has appeared in a number of interviews at the national and in the national and international television channels. We have three speakers today. I would introduce Mr. Paul Starrett first, who's going to speak. Paul is an attorney and an investigator. He specializes in data protection technology. His consulting firm specializes in automated integration, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity risk consulting. In his 25 years career, he has been a general counsel. He's been the information security software engineer and a chief risk officer. He holds a master's degree in predictive analysis from Northwestern University and a master's in law in taxation from the Golden Gate University. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Paul Starrett.
Hello, can all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Very good. Now, should I just jump in, or did you want to talk about the other panelists, or do you want to do that when they come up?
No, you carry on with yourself, and after you finish, I will introduce Don, and then after he finishes, I'll introduce Rohit.
All righty, great, thank you. It's an honor to follow the president and Pawan. I feel humbled, and I'm honored to be with the two panels we have here. I am going to go down a bit more into the weeds. Let me just share my screen here, and let me just tell you kind of what we've kind of thought would be the best way to handle this is, and by the way, I am Starrett Consulting, but I also am privacylabs.ai. That's really where I live now. So it's privacylabs.ai. And what I'm going to do is give sort of an introduction to data science and artificial intelligence to kind of give everyone a sense of what it can and can't do. And then since this is for the service industry generally, we're going to sort of go into investigations and security. So Don will follow me with some specifics on that, some fantastic examples. We'd hoped to cover the whole service industry, but thought that it would be good to have just one given the time limit we have. And I believe Rohit then will expand a bit more at the end. So I often will, let's see. I often present to lawyers who are, by their own admission, sort of at the bottom of the technology savvy scale. They kind of, I don't know, avoid technology. I can attest to that to some point. But really what we want to do is look at where we are. What is this thing called data science, which is sometimes includes artificial intelligence and machine learning. So data science, it's sort of these days, the single biggest competitive differentiator that enterprises have. This doesn't mean you have to be a big Fortune 500 company. It can be anyone. Data's gotten so out of hand that even small companies are now leveraging machine learning and artificial intelligence to become competitive and keep their risk profiles in place. 90% of information that we use now is data, and that should be no shock. What is big data? It's a term I don't care for. It's kind of come up and we hear it discussed, but it is basically any data that is too voluminous, that's too much of it, or it's too complex, or it's very fast moving, sort of the fire hose data. This is the data that is beyond conventional methods. And so what we do is, rather than talk about big data as a problem, we talk about the solution. And that solution is data science or machine learning. The most important thing to sort of acknowledge, and I'll get into this a little bit later, is that it's contextual. The machine learning, the artificial intelligence is very much sort of bound by the area that it serves. And what we'll see here today is how we use it in investigations. And it's kind of fascinating on its own. So here is probably the most important slide in this deck, and something that, again, if you're in the service industry, I would, or any industry, if you're using machine learning, this is probably the most important thing to think about. First, you have to understand the domain. That's here on the far left. That could be, for example, today's investigations. It could be delivery of services to customers. It could be various verticals like healthcare or finance and so forth. So that's the first thing that you do when you talk about machine learning or AI. Then you look at what data that you have available to you to help you find problems and to help you then solve any issues that you find in the domain. And again, we'll see that in an example here in investigations, a particular vertical. And it's only at that time that you decide to use machine learning or artificial intelligence. Because if the data is if there's not enough of it, or if it's not in the right form, then the machine learning tool itself can't learn anything from it. It's no better than the data that's based on. So that's really a huge takeaway for any entity or service industry or what have you, is this. This is sort of the higher overarching issue. I do have this slide that I was not sure I was going to put in, but I think it bears note that if you do have sort of standard, let's say, Excel or other tools that you can use to handle things, then you may or may not need some of these more advanced platforms that help you leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning. As you go up the size of the organization or the complexity of the organization, then there are pre-configured platforms that they will leverage. Some of them are very cost effective and very easy for people with some background in data science to leverage them to then build from the resources. Then you get into the large on the far right here. You have large companies who are using artificial intelligence as the rule rather than perhaps the exception in different pockets. Here you're using highly configured environments with IBM and Microsoft, and it's really kind of very kind of beyond the scope of this webinar, but bears mention because these are things that some on this webinar may want to look into. The other thing to think about is the different types of data. You have to kind of look at that when you start out. We're going a little bit more under the hood than we might normally, but these are things that you will have to think about as you venture into this area. What I have here is sort of just the, what type of data is there? And what difference does that make? So we have quantitative data, that's like numbers. We have qualitative, which is really called categorical. Don't worry about these definitions too much. Then we have structured data and we have unstructured. Structured is things like columns and rows, a spreadsheet, things like that, log files. Then we have unstructured, things like free-form text, perhaps HTML, your web page uses what we call semi-structured data. So just wanted to show you, this is kind of the world we live in, and these are the different buckets that we generally look at with machine learning. And this is where it all kind of comes down. This is where it all kind of funnels in. What we have is we have unstructured data here at the top left. We first have to structure it before we can use it in machine learning. So for example, the body of an email is free-form text. There are ways in which the machine learning software will structure that so that it can then be used in the machine learning algorithm. And then there's qualitative, what I call qualitative. These are things that are basically numbers, or not numbers, like me, Paul Sterrett. I can't put my name into a formula. Data science, machine learning is all math. So what I do is I can leverage aspects about me that are numeric, like my age or my height or my IQ, things like that. So when we're talking about using machine learning with things, then we are using numeric aspects of those things. And this is called, this is often used in classification. So this all kind of winds up coming over here to the far left, where we structure our data first, and then we have to leverage numeric aspects of it. Otherwise, machine learning is not going to work. When it comes to the area of the investigations, we're basically looking for things that are risk, that are threats, or that are not typical. So one thing that we'll do is it's called anomaly detection. What is not normal is considered to be a red flag or something we need to look into. It could also be, though, just a mistake or just benign activity. The other thing that we use is an area called predictive analytics, where we take known threats, we learn from those, and then based on what we've learned, we can then use that knowledge to predict what may happen in the future. And I think our president here was kind of touching on that, where we were talking about sort of the ability to think and to simulate and to make decisions. So these are sort of the two main buckets. The big difference here with anomaly detection is called unsupervised. All we're doing is we're asking the algorithm or the machine learning software to tell us what's not normal. We don't know what is wrong in the data, but this will tell us. Down here in predictive analytics, we do know what's wrong, and we're trying to teach the algorithm to go find it out in the real world. And so here's a good example of, let's just say that we have somebody is accessing a server from different points. And each one of these numbers is basically just a number showing us the number of times that this server is accessed. What we do is we get the average. And the standard deviation is the way we do that. Again, this is sort of a quick lesson in math, where we have this line here that says, what is the average distance of these points from the average? That's kind of a loose way of saying what's considered anomalous, or what's considered something we have to look at. So if someone, let's say, is in the services industry of network security, they might say, well, wait a minute, why is somebody accessing the server so many times outside of what is normal? So this software helps us find where we need to focus. And that's really the whole goal here. Some examples here would be illegitimate loans, people taking out a whole series of very small loans to avoid detection. So by doing so, if you see very low amounts over a period of time, that may be somebody who's trying to steal, but not become detected. Because if I'm going to steal $1 million, I'm probably not going to do it all at once, because it's going to raise some questions. Conflict of interest, a loan to a friend, and so forth. Payroll, I'll get into this in a second as an example, where you have an employee who's not real. They're not a real employee, or kickbacks or bribery. And here's where I'll get into that a bit. here on this, now this is machine learning. Okay, just be clear, we are artificial intelligence is limited. I think the days of the Terminator taking over the world is a ways off. Some of the deep learning that the president alluded to is getting there, but it's still a ways off. But for us today, and for those of us who are thinking about, this is kind of where we're going to live more often than not. So what I have here is the sales calls per week on the left, and sales, the amount of sales in dollars here down at the bottom. You'll note an obvious relationship here, that the more calls that the person makes, the more money that they're earning. And so you have these different terms. You don't have to worry about what these mean, but the tighter that these dots are around this line, the stronger the correlation. So you could use this in any service industry to sort of determine a relationship that you see. And I'll show you in a minute how that's very useful. But in our case, we are doing investigations to see what's going on. And so here I have the, you'll notice that between the two, these dots are spread away from that line more. That's just saying that the relationship is not as strong. So it would be a bit less reliable. So that's sort of one of the things we do in data science that is an important piece of the analysis. So here is the standard deviation we mentioned. We're sort of drawing lines around what we think is the normal range that we want to see. But what about these things out here, these outliers? In this case, why is it that we have an employee that's making 5 phone calls a week and is only making $2 million during that time frame? Well, this could be what's called a straw employee. It's somebody who's not real. Someone in payroll has invented a person and is trying to steal money. Well, they're trying to indicate they're making lots of calls and only making $2 million. They're trying to stay off the radar here. This one over here, how is it that somebody's only making 1 call and making $15 million? They could be legitimate, or maybe they're taking bribes. Maybe there's kickbacks going on. This person's not doing anything, making lots of money. So you can see how we use this information to help us determine what is or is not something we should look at. Because ultimately, we have so much data, we don't have time to look at everything here. We have to find ways to help us drill down and find where problems are. You could use this in another context. This could be some other form of an outlier that tells you why someone is or isn't getting enough customer contact, or maybe they are ineffective in some way. So it's not just limited to investigations. Here's a good example of how we use this for prediction. We can say that, well, if we have, this is, you don't have 2.5 calls. This is an average here. But if you had, let's say, 3 phone calls a month, you would expect this person to make about $5.5 million. So this line not only establishes the relationship, it also helps us predict. And that's called predictive analytics. So you can see how we leverage this. So if a person's making 5 calls a month, we would expect that they would be making $11 million a month. And if they aren't, why not? So you can see how this works both as a way of understanding what's going on, looking for outliers, but also making predictions. We also use things for, primarily, we are using unsupervised learning for doing exploratory review. So for example, in the case of unsupervised learning, what we're doing is we're asking the algorithm to go into data and find patterns that are already in the data that we need to, will help us understand what's going on in the data. There's this neat tool called Carrot2, C-A-R-R-O-T, Carrot, C-A-R-R-O-T2, or Carrot squared is how it's put. The reason they use that name is because if you search for carrot on the internet, you'll get soup recipes. But this is a free plugin that you can put into your browser. And when you run a Google search, it will cluster your results. It will then, what it will do is it will pick a subject that it found, a pattern that it found, a search pattern, and it will group the documents for you. And you'll see here how if you want to, you can click on one of these and it will show you what URLs, search return results are part of that cluster. you can see here how this would really help you sort of understand the big picture and how you could, let's say, for example, focus on one of these clusters as opposed to others. So this is called unsupervised learning. What it's doing is it's going in this case, it's going into the search results. It is then looking for patterns and clusters and bringing them back to you for review. Now you can tell it how many clusters you want it to return to kind of give you different levels of granularity. But this is the beauty of machine learning and exploring data. There's an area called document clustering. Again, what we're really doing here is going into documents, and what it will do is it will look for common words and phrases and concepts, and we'll bring those back and present them to you very much like we did here. So again, as you are, if you're in a service industry and you're trying to find out information about what kind of activity is going on, what works and what doesn't, this type of machine learning is very effective. Here's just a quick example of how we're going to use clustering, this unsupervised method, to help us find data that is troublesome. So here I've got CEO is mailing her husband and emailing the board and emailing some vendors. Again, these are things that the software has found for us in the patterns. Over here, we have the chief financial officer who's doing social media posts to the bank and to her husband. And what we're going to do is we're just going to assume that we've found these, we've got hundreds of clusters that we have built from 1 million documents. And then from these hundreds, we have focused on these two things here because there's something about them that stands out. And so what we do then is what we might assume is we find some activity that's occurred within this, while we're reviewing these different documents and posts and so on, we find issues, legal issues that we want to pursue. So what we would do is we would then go in and we would go into those emails and posts and tag them as relevant to a conspiracy or to money laundering or fraud or contract breach, what have you, and build a predictive model out of that. And so what we can do then is once we have those patterns, we can take the 1 million files that we started with and run those through the predictive model, and it will look at each of the files and see if it matches a pattern that would be indicative of any of these different areas. And then we can continue our investigation. Here, what we do in with a lot of times with machine learning and risk and cybersecurity is we'll look at log files. What happens is all of your applications and solutions generate records whenever there's an activity that occurs on them, and they send it into a central place where logs are. And what people do is they'll look at the log files, they will cluster them, and they'll find, oh, certain clusters of logs are indicative of some sort of a threat. And then there are others that are not. And what it's able to do is learn from that and then build a model for it so that if it goes out into the infrastructure of an enterprise, it can look at the patterns that are coming in or that exist and say, ah, this looks like something that's a threat. This is not. So here we're using, like we indicated earlier, we're learning from the past. We're using that knowledge to help us find things that are existing or that are in the future that are threats. Some of the big problems with fraud, for example, are that we find are what's called class imbalance. The issue here is that we have very, very few examples of what fraud is and enormous numbers of transactions that are not. The problem here is that when you use machine learning, you have what's called class imbalance, a very common problem. You have this issue where it's very difficult to build something because the data is not helping you. There's too much here. There's a lot of conflation across these two types of transactions, and it's very difficult for the algorithm to learn from it enough that it can tell the difference if it sees a new transaction. So that's a big problem. One thing that everyone knows about is spam, for example. The problems you have with spam. What isn't spam? You know what spam is, but what is not? It's difficult to find that mutual exclusivity with your in the patterns of the data. So this is something we all know. We get a lot of email that's actually legitimate, and and it's annoying because we want to read something that's important, but you also get things that it misses spam. You get things that are annoying that come into your inbox. So I mention that just because these are the common problems that we see in machine learning, and they're always there and always things you have to consider. The other things you also have to consider are things like what they call responsible AI. You have to think about privacy. You have to think about security and bias. Are you inadvertently, discriminating against somebody or causing some other social injustice that you don't know about? You want to know about it and be able to work with it. And there's also robustness. Is the model doing what you think it's doing? So I think that's kind of it for me. And I hope that I wasn't going too much under the hood, but I thought it was very important. I'm coming up at the end of my 20 minutes here, to kind of set the ground rules for what we're looking at here. What is it? And what, as a service industry professional or manager or executive, these are the things you have to think about. Thinking about the structure of the data and so forth. So I hope that gives some sort of structure to what's going to follow with Don, who's going to give us some examples that he has seen in the world. So I think that I will then relinquish back the screen here.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Okay.
I think it's been a wonderful talk, and I think everybody would have a lot to take away from here. And now I'd like to introduce Don Aviv to everyone. Don is the president of Interfor International. He's an adjunct professor at the University of Maryland and teaches subjects on homeland security. He's the chair of the board of a company called Strength to Strength, which is a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting victims of terrorism. Don advises startups in the artificial intelligence space, and currently he advises a company called Bond, B-O-N-D, another company called Reputation Communication. Third is a company called Canary, which is on advising on homeland security. Another company called Rave Mobile Safety, which develops emergency notifications. He sits on the board of Verdian Capital, a private equity company, and he's a partner in Outland, which works in the area of security technology. Over to you, Don.
Thank you very much. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. I understand that we're spread around the world, and that's a tremendous feat in itself. As we sit back and talk about artificial intelligence, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the fact that we are speaking to each other and we're communicating from our homes, offices, bedrooms around the world. And I think that in itself is an exceptional feat. So I'd like to start off by introducing who I am and why I am here today and what I bring to this conversation. I'm the president of a 50-year-old global intelligence, security consulting, and risk management firm. We have around 300 investigators and researchers and analysts around the world. While we use traditional investigative and security consulting techniques routinely, we also leverage AI-enabled systems for almost every case, every consultation, and every matter that we have around the world. Most of our clients are everything from Fortune 1000s, Fortune 500s, but also we support most industries, whether it's large corporations, governments, banking, law firms, supply chain, hospitality, construction, law firm, human resources, and anyone engaged in cross-border trade will support you. As the introduction expressed, I'm also working with a variety of startups. And at last count, I believe we have around 8 startups under our belt. And these are all technology software startups that use embedded AI systems, and they deploy AI to the extent that's necessary to further the goals of the organization. Most of them are in the security space, but they touch upon the services industries from a variety of different angles. And I'm happy to answer any questions after or talk to you offline as to what those startups are doing and how they may be leveraged in your worlds. So I'd also like to thank Paul for giving such an in-depth and informative comprehensive overview of AI. I'm not myself a technologist. I leverage technology. I deploy it. My firms do, but I myself do not have a deep level of technical expertise. However, I see the need and the benefit and how important technology is for almost everything that we do. So thank you, Paul, for that. You really set the stage for the conversation. I'm going to delve a little bit deeper into specific case studies. I'm going to frame my conversation with specific cases that we have underway right now, or we've worked in the past, to highlight how we leveraged AI and the benefits and the cons. And it's important that I say cons because I do believe there are significant detractions to using AI in the investigative space and the security consulting and consulting spaces because AI does have its limitations, which I will discuss. So a disclaimer, I must say that as some of these cases or live cases or previous cases, I'm bound by confidentiality. So I will not discuss the specific company names or talk about any individual specifically. I will use general terms. A lot of you, most of you are very, very, very bright and could probably figure out who some of these companies are. So I just ask you to keep that to yourselves. So some of the concepts that I will cover, what is AI as it pertains to our industries? What does it really mean to the service industry? How can we leverage it? What's the importance? That's, very much what I'm going to be leading with and the overview of what I'll be discussing. But first and foremost, it's important, very important to highlight that we are lumping terms together. Paul discussed it, he brushed upon it, but I really want to drill down into this. We are legitimately lumping together terms and concepts that don't necessarily all fit under the same roof, but we're doing so for the ease of discussion. The catchphrase, the term that everyone always uses is AI, artificial intelligence. But what we really need to be doing, what the real focus should be, is drilling down more specifically into the terms of computer vision, computer learning, big data, deep learning, and the deployment of algorithms, the creation and deployment of algorithms. That's really what we should be discussing because those sub-concepts are really what you are deploying and what you are leveraging in your day-to-day, but they're being pulled together and into one bucket called AI. So for the purpose of the discussion, we'll go with it. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that AI is really a misnomer as we discuss servicing our industries. So AI does have its place. That's another concept that I want to relay. While technology in general has helped us tremendously over the years, it is my contention that nothing replaces human intelligence, human ingenuity, and know-how. And quite frankly, I don't believe, I'm one of the few that believes that it never will, likely never will. No matter how advanced these systems get, nothing replaces humanity. The ability to understand data, understand people, understand fact patterns, look for nuances. Yes, there are systems and technology that do a great job, but when you're faced with the security, the risk management, and the investigative world, nothing replaces a human investigator, in my belief. Human analyst is in my belief, unparalleled. But a smart investigator, a smart analyst, a smart intelligence member will use technology and AI to further their cases. And if they're smart about it, they will leverage it to the best extent possible. But quite frankly, I just want to leave you with that. I'm one of the few people that believes that humanity will reign supreme at the end of the day, but we must harness the powers of technology. So I'm going to talk about specific case studies and how we use them to bring happy conclusions to our clients and to solve cases and to kind of speed things along, which I believe is really, at the end of the day, what AI enables us to do: move things along quicker, speed things along, and allow us to digest more with fewer resources. So I also, as a personal belief, believe that AI has its blind spots. It has its failings, it has its shortcomings, but mainly because we as humans created it, right? So it's a reflection, an extension of some of our shortcomings. So that's important to understand, that when you get a result from an AI-driven system, we can't just say, that's fantastic, that is the result, and put our hand on the Bible and say, yes, I can testify in front of court, because a lot of these systems reflect the shortcomings of humanity as well. So why do we use AI? What are the pros? Very, very easy. I think this is the thing that we all understand to a certain extent, but it's worth reiterating. So as a society, we use AI systems to do all the menial and time-consuming tasks that humans are not well suited for. We should know our limitations. We all have limitations, and one of it is attention to detail and the ability to digest and analyze copious amounts of data. So as long as we identify those shortcomings, we'll understand the benefits and the pros of using AI. So as a company, specifically, we use AI for the following categories, and I'm going to read them out just because I'd like to put a pin in each one. Analyzing and processing huge sets of data. This is important because we often, in global investigations, receive a tremendous amount of data, and it's impossible for any one human being to analyze or to go sift through it all and look for patterns. Conducting specific analysis. We deploy algorithms to look for certain patterns, certain information, and how it relates to each other. So that's another thing. Pattern recognition. While humans are great at looking at certain patterns on a micro scale, we're not so great at looking at it at a global scale. So AI-driven systems are tremendous when it comes to pattern recognition because they can find linkages and nuances that the human eye might miss. Predictive analytics. This is a little bit of a step up from just your regular analysis tools. This allows you to not only understand a set of data, but also to determine and understand how it can predict information or events or occurrences in the future. And so this is great when we're doing terrorism vulnerability assessments, for example. When we're trying to understand the terrorism risk against a venue or a locale, we want to predict what kinds of attacks may come down, and what vectors of attack. So we'll use predictive analytics. Due diligence, this doesn't need to be explained. We use AI for due diligence routinely. Anomaly recognition. This goes back to the pattern recognition. AI-driven systems have a tremendous ability to look for anomalies in data sets. So we use them routinely to look for suspicious transactions, suspicious travel patterns, whatever they may be. We definitely deploy anomaly recognition systems. Red flags analysis. That's a catch-all term. We use it routinely, but what is a red flag? A red flag to me is different than a red flag to you. So red flags systems are only as good, this is my contention, only as good as the database that they're pulling from. The system that has all the inputs and the stimuli in that system, if they're good, then your red flags analysis will be good. So they have to be very, very strong systems to be effective. We use AI for mass background checks. It's not a great due diligence investigation into an entity, an individual, or a company, but if you're doing hundreds and thousands of them at any given time, AI systems can help you sift through background. Internet and dark web searches. We deploy AI systems to troll the internet, troll the dark web, scrape for information. AI-driven systems are tremendous when it comes to that. Repetitive document review. It goes without saying, I don't have to delve too deep into that, but sometimes we are in a case or an analysis or in a project, we're given tens of thousands of pieces of paper, and it's impossible for any human being to sift through it and not lose their mind. So we use AI-driven systems to look for the information that we require in the project. This will include keyword searches. AI systems are great for keyword searches, both in email analysis and also in paper documentation, as long as you can scan, OCR it into your system to understand the words. Email analysis, this is great. There are a lot of great AI embedded systems that study emails, looking for fraud, looking for patterns, looking for connections, looking for things that as a human being would be next to impossible to do in real time. Email analysis systems can do them on the fly, operate in the background off your servers, your company servers, your client servers, and just present you with alerts when something suspicious occurs. And that's fantastic. Facial recognition. This is one of my most favorite aspects of AI. I'm on the board of a startup that is revolutionizing AI, facial recognition for access control. It has an algorithm that is 99.9% effective and can identify someone with a mask or without a mask even within seconds, microseconds. So this is something that we're very excited about, and nothing beats AI-driven systems when it comes to facial recognition. If I were to take your picture today and your picture from a year ago and your picture for 5 years ago and put them in front of me, it would be very difficult for me as an individual to figure out if you are the same person in all three pictures. However, the facial recognition systems today are very good at identifying, due to measurements, analytics, and very, very rich algorithms, whether these pictures match the same individual. So that's probably the feather in the cap of AI-driven systems. Social media analysis. This is what's being used by just about everyone, from the Facebooks of the world to Amazon to all the big ones, and we can use them as private citizens as well. There are a lot of AI-driven systems that just scrape the social media and traditional media as well, because almost all traditional media is now digitized. Compliance checks. We use this for a variety of compliance checks, and I'll explain that a little bit further. Data verification. Nothing, I mean, the other feather in the cap of AI is, I would say, data verification systems, because again, it goes back to the concept of humans have limitations as to how much they can, or how much data they can review at any given time. Whereas these AI-driven systems can just continuously churn through tremendous amounts of data to look for whatever it is you're looking for, verify the veracity of it, also determine how it's linked together. So that a subset of that, or how it's used, is through our systems for AML checks, anti-money laundering checks, is a data verification tool, and that runs most banking institutions around the world use a version of it. So we'll go into that. So I know I'm speaking fast. My apologies. I think that's the New Yorker in me, but at the same time, we're trying to get through a lot of data, and we have a third speaker, so I apologize about that. So that's the general, I'd say, components of AI systems, the types of AI systems that we use. And now I'm going to explain 4 case studies, and I'll run through them briefly. These are the 4 case studies of how we've deployed these types of systems for the furtherance of a project, investigation, or an intelligence project that spans the globe. And now all of these cases are global in nature. Whether they started in India and ended up in Canada, or started in Canada and ended up in Russia, whatever it may be, all these projects are global. And that's a true benefit of using or deploying AI, is because boundaries, languages, geographies are limitless when it comes to the how good the systems can be. So my first case study, a human resources group for a very large company. And when I say very large company, I mean, this company has a couple 100,000 employees around the world. It's a organization that does business around the world and has, I think 300,000 employees around the world, last count. But the issue with that is, it's not just how many employees they have today, it's how many employees, the turnover they have, and how many new employees they have to onboard and process at any given time. So we were tasked with improving the efficacy of their human resources operations from a fraud, security, and compliance perspective, right? So it's a niche of their needs. As I said, they had a couple 100,000 employees, and their background checks were dragging. Their needs for onboarding employees was far surpassing their ability to process background checks, compliance checks, and onboard individuals to make sure that they're even hiring someone that's real, a real person. And if they are real, they're not fraudsters. So, and also, once they're on board, how do you keep tabs on them over the life cycle of when they're involved in the company. So it started with resume and applicant analyses, right? So this company gets thousands of resumes a week, tens of thousands of resumes a week. How can they process these resumes, these CVs, as some call them, in a timely fashion, and at the same time identify concerns, which is really the ultimate game of that. And something that statistics that the organization that manages human resources professionals around the world often states that 80% of CVs have some level of falsehoods or omissions in their CVs. Now, think about that for a second. 80%. So whether it's an address that's wrong, an education that's wrong, a degree that's incorrect, or some sort of thing, item that's a problem, they want to sift through all these and make sure that these are not even reviewed or sent to the junk pile. Now, when you're getting thousands a week, that's a very big task for a human individual, right? So the AI systems that were deployed looked for falsehoods. They looked for linkages. They did the math on timing. So you were at one job from this year to that year, the next job from that year to that. It found gaps in time in education. It found gaps in employment history, and it tried to understand whether that's a red flag or not. Why are you missing 6 years of employment between jobs? Were you just out of work, or were you in prison? So these are the types of things that the tools can sift through instantly that a human may not have the time or the ability to do. So we also created an infrastructure where background reviews were done, criminal records were assessed at a very rapid pace, social media was reviewed, media was reviewed on an individual, and that was a tremendous process that took something that would take years down to seconds. So, we would use these for ongoing checks, and the secret sauce to what we deployed was the ongoing check, right? We flagged 6 or 7 attributes of an individual, in their psychological attributes. We embedded them into an algorithm, and we combed social media and media to see if any references of any of these 6 categories appeared in media about an individual. And that would be an indicator of fraud. So I could talk about this at nausea, but this is something that is very, very exciting and can help process and onboard any sets of data, but specifically it's great for resume reviews, background checks, due diligence, and ongoing reviews throughout the life cycle of an individual. Second case study. This was a pattern recognition and predictive analytics matter. So a multinational financial institution, one of the larger ones out there, they bank in, I'm sure, all the countries that are represented on this call. They wanted to find ways to hunt for fraud amongst the transactions embedded in the company, across countries. They wanted a tool that would start looking for red flags. So first things first, we had to understand what those red flags were. So we had to ingest tons and tons of historical data on fraudulent activities and issues that they had experienced as a financial institution, not just themselves, but also some of their peers, to look for and give a number attribute to each types of fraud and embed it into the algorithm to understand these types of tools. So this institution transacts billions of dollars on a daily basis. So billions of dollars are transiting across its networks on any given day. So we needed an algorithm to be embedded throughout this transaction process to understand if any of these transactions were suspicious, were fraudulent, were known to be issues, or were okay. And if they were okay, then obviously no remediation necessary. So we created a predictive model as well that would attempt to see pattern recognition as to what some of these transactions may look like, and give an understanding to this corporate security department that we may have a problem in country X or in sector Y, because it's looking for the type of accounts that were opened, what kind of transactions were utilized, money in, money flow out, some of the backgrounds on the account holders. A lot of that was used to create a template that would scrape the transactions and look for the possibility of future issues. And it's exciting. It's really cutting edge stuff. So they say that this process successfully reduced fraud by 32% in the first year, and an additional 20% the next year on top of that. So when you're talking about these numbers, you're talking about millions upon millions of dollars that are being saved by an AI-driven system that is scraping for certain patterns, but also has a predictive model on top of it. So that's kind of a success story of using AI in a methodology, in a process that as humans, we just couldn't feasibly do in real time. And if we do try it in real time, it'll take us, weeks, months, and years to find something that occurred that had already occurred in an instant. So moving on. Case study 3, a government's tax authority, their tax authority was having issues with expat tax absconders. And so these are individuals who have spent time, who moved to the country, who are required to pay tax locally, built businesses, traveled, had brought their families in, lived their lives, but didn't pay the level of taxes that they are required, and then moved back to their home country or to a third country. So this was a big problem for this one country because we're not talking about, we're not talking about the small amounts of a couple $1,000, a couple $100. We're talking about their top 20, 30 largest tax absconders who owe in excess of hundreds of millions of dollars combined. And this is a significant amount of money. Now, these are people who are claiming poverty. They're claiming that they don't have any assets anymore. They picked up their, their tents and they went home to wherever they came from. And so the problem for the country was, where are these people? Do they have money? How do they travel? How are they living? Where do they go? And do they have an ability to make good on their tax obligations? So
3 minutes more for you.
What's that?
3 minutes for you more.
Okay, so long story short, we went through all of these systems. We created a dark web port scraping tool. We looked for airplane ownership. We had to find them first. And so we used facial recognition systems embedded in cameras and embedded in a lot of social media transactions. And we used a lot of facial recognition systems that we created to look for where they are in the world. What kind of toys do they have? What kind of systems do they have? What kind of assets do they have? And look for banking relationships and familial relationships. And I'm happy to say that today we were able to locate 70% of them, and most of them have made a deal with the country to repatriate some level of assets, whatever that might be. Quickly do the last case study because it's very exciting for us. This was a threat and analysis tool pre-pandemic. We were retained by one of the largest owners of sporting venues and concert venues around the world. And they wanted a way to predict and to understand the level of crime, fraud, general crime, theft and hooliganism, and terrorism that may impact their stadiums. So we needed to understand, analyze, study copious amounts of data from each country, not just each country, each city, each town, wherever these venues were. We needed to understand their security systems. We needed to look into ingest their data, their schematics, and then create a predictive model to assess and rate the level of risk against each of these venues from a security standpoint, terrorism risk. So we were able to create a tool to understand and to assess this level of security risk against all their facilities around the world. And then, unfortunately, the pandemic hit, and no one was playing sports or going to concerts or having venues. So that hopefully will come back online in due course. But it was a threat ranking and analysis tool that has never been seen before. So my last comment is, AI is great. It's tremendously useful for day to day, but it can never truly replace humans. It's not a panacea, and it's a great tool when used properly. But unfortunately, it's not always used properly. So I will rest with that. Thank you.
Don, thank you so much. I think we learned a lot from you, and the way you've deployed artificial intelligence to better the business, I think it's great. Now we have a third speaker, and the third speaker is Rohit Agarwal. And Rohit is the CTO of Cogito Tech, which is an artificial intelligence startup with presence in the United States and India. Rohit is a serial entrepreneur involved with AI for the last 5 years. Before Cogito, he ran a fintech venture. He's a programmer by training. He has over 15 years experience working in Merrill Lynch and companies like Verizon. He has a bachelor's degree in computer science and an MBA in finance and entrepreneurship from the Booth School of Business. Now over to Rohit Agarwal. Rohit, you're muted.
Sorry, my apologies. Thank you, Mr. Aluwalia, and thank you to NISMIT for organizing this this forum. I'd also like to thank Paul and Dawn, who did a great job of laying the framework of basic principles of AI. I'm going to pick up and talk about where one of the AI areas that Dawn mentioned, which is computer vision. That's my primary area of work. And my thought was that I can give you a few examples of the use of computer vision and what it is and how it works, and the various industries where it's being used right now. So you guys can get a better sense of what this particular field of AI means. So when we talk about computer vision, the basic tenet is that we are trying to train a camera to do whatever a human eye can. So when we walk into a room or when we're driving on a road, we're able to see and notice a lot of things with our eyes and make sense of what is what. And the idea behind computer vision is to make the camera do exactly what our human eye can. So think about when we talk about self-driving cars, the way that those algorithms work is, someone drove a car from Los Angeles to San Francisco with a camera on top of the car, and they took millions and millions of images of the streets and the traffic and all of that. And then these images need to be processed. So this is the data that is there for the artificial intelligence algorithm. And now these images need to be processed, and they need to be fed back into the computer so the computer can learn itself, which is what we call machine learning. So the way we process this data is we will get these images from our clients, and we'll say, look, this is what a car looks like. This is what a bus looks like. This is a stop sign. This is a green traffic signal. This is a red traffic signal. So we mark up these this data and make it ready in a format that a computer can ingest it. And now once a computer gets a million such images, then over time, it's going to start recognizing what a car is. It's going to start recognizing what a pedestrian is, what a bus looks like, and when is a red traffic signal, when is a green traffic signal. So I hope that's given you a little bit of sense of what computer vision is. Now, as you can imagine, this has applications in every industry you can think of. So we work with clients in manufacturing, in insurance, in retail, in agriculture, in healthcare, security and surveillance. So anything that you can pretty much think of where a camera can be installed and can make intelligent decisions, we work with those clients. So for instance, today in the field of agriculture, instead of a farmer walking the whole land, they've got multiple acres and sometimes hectares of land. So instead of them walking the entire piece of land, finding the weeds, finding areas which need more water than the others, finding the diseased areas, now a drone can help them do all of that. So they will fly a drone over the fields, and the drone will detect and say, look, this is a weed, this is a proper crop, this area potentially needs more water supply. So again, the idea being you save a lot of time, a lot of energy, and the camera is fitted with an algorithm that can make these decisions for you. I think Dawn also touched a little bit about things like facial recognition. So specifically in security and surveillance, the facial recognition is one big aspect. The other is, we work with clients who want to detect for guns and small sharp objects when you're walking into a mall or you're walking into an office space. We also have companies that are building algorithms which are detecting your the way you walk. So when you're walking towards, let's say, a building, a camera can look at you and say, this guy is coming in a friendly pose. He's coming as a non-dominant person. His walk is looking submissive. And on the other hand, it could flag somebody and say this person has got a very aggressive tone in their walk, which could signal some trouble. So anything and everything that you can think of that could happen with cameras, it's already happening. We've been involved in this field for the last 5 years, and it's only getting more and more complex. The kind of use cases that people are doing these days, all across all these sectors, it's a very exciting space, and I firmly believe that next 25 years, AI is going to touch every aspect of our lives. It's already touched many that we are not even aware of. But now slowly we're going to see it all around us, and it's going to touch everything. So I hope that's been helpful, and I'm of course happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
All right. Thank you, Rohit. Thank you so much. I think the first question goes out to Mr. Sukhinder Singh. Sukhinder, if you can sort of ask your question, please. Are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you so much. First of all, I'm very excited to be a part of this for the first time. And it's a really, really good hearing to the speakers, and that's a lot of learning on AI and machine learning. The one thing that I wanted to quickly check, and that what I've been, so I've been a part of AI programs for almost say about 7 to 8 years now. So I'm keep asking myself a question, which is, what is the future of AI in service industry? When I say that, the AI has been used very exhaustively in the service industry, and it's going to be the same for the next couple of years, beating all other industries like marketing, technology, and product. So why is AI so important in the service industry, and at this given point in time, more than any technology industry?
Who would like to answer? Paul, I think more of an academic question.
Yes, that's a big question, but I think I don't remember which the two panelists touched on this, but it's, I think Don was, what AI is very good at doing is automating simple tasks. Think about the human body, your heart, your lungs, your eyes. You don't blink your eyes consciously. All of that is automated for you. I think AI is very good at doing that for your enterprise, so that you can, whether it's for security, to protect what you have, whether it's to increase customer retention, whether it's to look for metrics to find out how to improve the efficiency of your internal workflows. That's the way to first look at it, I think. Because service industry, how do you define that? Is kind of an open question, and we all have our own sense of what that is. But in services, you're delivering something to someone else that is not necessarily a product. So you're looking at human behavior and so forth. So I would look at it from that standpoint, and that's the value that I see that it has.
I would agree with that. I just add that the increase in globalization of companies and entities, and the exponential increase in the amount of data that is being processed and transacted around the world just makes it a benefit for AI. I mean, AI is the only thing that can really assess, analyze, and manage such data sets.
Right. Thank you so much. Sanjeev Chachra, General Sanjeev Chachra, you have a question?
Thank you. I think it's been a very innovative and a very intelligent panelist discussion. I think something new that we've learned today. What I want to ask is that this AI is a technological innovation where there is a huge amount of data, which is the prime mover. But we find that there are no regulators or self-imposed limitations, leaving this huge data to risks of privacy, security, ethical concerns, and even non-state actors. How do you see the world reacting in the future in looking at this major concern of everyone, particularly with the kind of data that you are actually holding? And this primarily would probably go to, say, Paul, and then followed by Don.
Yes, that's, you see my head bouncing. That's something I've specialized in, actually, because at Privacy Labs, that's the name. PrivacyLabs.ai is that's where I live now. Stair Consulting is. But your question, that's a great question. There are, I think it's only going to get more imposing, if you will, because there's this sort of relationship between the amount of data that you have for your algorithms, which is the biggest problem we have. The more data you have, the more you can learn. But privacy and data protection laws prevent you from getting that data. So you have this sort of tension. And the idea is that there are techniques you can use to make what they call privacy preserving artificial intelligence. And it actually uses machine learning to do that for you. It will obfuscate the personal information underneath. There's another area called explainability, an area that I'm particularly kind of getting involved in, where if you know what the algorithm's doing, you're better able to prove that it's not biasing things. A lot of these privacy laws will hit you hard if you are being unfair to people, okay? GDPR, you probably know about that. There's the Article 22, which talks about your impact on somebody with automated decision-making. So I think the ability to explain the model, okay, and the ways in which you can find the best sweet spot between getting as much data as you can without violating privacy rights. And so that is a doable thing. There's a thing called synthetic data, and I don't want to get too far off of field here, where you generate data on top of real data that gives you a better ability to generate useful information that is not private. I think it's going to get only more imposing because the laws in California, in the United States, all the states are lining up now, like California, and it's really becoming kind of, an issue. But this is an issue, and it is a manageable one, is my opinion. Did that answer your question?
Yes, you have. But I'm trying to figure out how we are going to actually the people, like somebody who's got all the data. How will we ensure that he does not share it with somebody it's not supposed to be shared with? The privacy concerns.
That's a Don thing. That's a Don thing.
You ask a very good question. And that's I would say there's an additional level to that question. And that is, how do you protect that data from not just foreign state actors or state actors, but also the majority of the hacks, the majority of the theft of information occurs by individuals, criminal rings, or small groups that just steal the data for usage and sell. So we see in the dark web tremendous amount of personal data that is being sold on individuals around the world. And so that data is a commodity unto itself now, and there's a value to that. So the new criminal enterprise is hacking into corporations and entities that have these big data sets, stealing it, and then either manipulating it or selling it. So the new arms race from our perspective is, how do you protect data? What tools do you have in place, and what protections do you have? And quite frankly, the answer today is there are no true protections. There are no true systems. Almost every security system can be breached as long as it touches the internet. So one way or the other, there's no way to protect any system. So we're seeing a proliferation of warfare against companies and individuals and private entities that maintain these systems. And it's a very interesting thing, but we're watching it today. This is the problem. You have identified something that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis now. So we'll see where this goes.
Rohit, would you like to add as to what exactly you are doing when you're writing the software and you're programming, as to how do you sort of go about making sure that the data is protected at all times?
I'm just, if I can just come back to this question in 1 minute, I'm just trying to get to a space that's a little less noisy, please. Just give me 1 minute, please.
Sorry. Paul, you want to weigh in between?
Yeah, I was going to say, very well said, Don. I think that there's a move to the cloud because that's where people are trying to ingest data from many different places. So they have to be in a private or public cloud. There's a whole new move to what's called serverless computing. And why I mention that is because there are protections there that eliminate old threats to breaches in exfiltration of data, but there are new ones that come along. So it's this constantly moving target where with with application security and serverless platforms and public clouds like, cloud systems like Amazon and so on. But it's a moving target, and we're all trying to keep up. So there's the protective aspect, and there's the go after and find out what the bad guy did and try and get it back aspect. So.
Rohit, are you okay to answer
Yes,
now?
yes, absolutely. So I think Paul answered a part, gave part of the answer there. These cloud platforms are all designed in a way that they are ISO 9001 certified, they're SOC 2 Type 2 certified, HIPAA compliant, and GDPR compliant. These are all information and data security standards that these cloud services have. And so just when let's say, let me give my company as an example. When we're dealing with the customer data, we're also required to have all of these strict data security standards where the data is key and data theft is the biggest risk to our business. So we have all the controls in place to make sure that a client's data cannot be replicated, cannot be reproduced once it enters our environment. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes. Don, there's a question for you. In your case studies, you mentioned that you use a lot of tools in the AI space. So the question is, what are the tools that you use, and are they proprietary to yourself, or they are available in the market? What exactly is it?
Right. So it's a great question. There are a variety of tools that we use. I'd say 80 to 90% we develop for ourselves, the proprietary tools that we've created for specific clients, but they leverage a lot of the underlying tools that are publicly accessible. When I say publicly accessible, I mean that you can access them by purchasing or engaging with a third party. So each of the tools that I've mentioned have different ramifications. So it's a better question for an offline discussion because each of our case studies have specific multitude of tools that we can talk about in nuance. But quite frankly, there are a lot of tools that you can engage. I mean, some of the big data aggregators, the IBMs of the world, the Googles of the world, offer accessible tools to manage analytics. But the things that we create are the facial recognition algorithms, and a lot of that is germane just to us. We've created it, and we sell it to third parties or to clients. So, sorry, it's a non-answer answer.
Yeah, okay, that's fine actually. But there's another question that we have is, everything on the investigative side, even healthcare is investigative in nature. Diagnostics are investigative in nature. And that seems to be a very big industry that's sort of moving into the AI space. Would you like to comment on it, Don?
Yeah, we didn't, and I neglected to mention that previously, but quite frankly, healthcare is one of the largest consumers of AI-driven systems. I mean, we're seeing tremendous developments in diagnostic tools, everything from, cancer studies to reading x-rays and radiology, all the way to predictive analytics when it comes to your health or potential health based on family history and ingesting all that data. So there's been a tremendous explosion of AI-driven tools in healthcare. And I think that, and we were remiss in commenting before, is probably going to be the single greatest advancement or deployment of AI going forward because of its ability to help do things. When you can study a whole country's worth of data, of health data, instantly to determine, trends, and the pandemic is showing us today that the tools, AI, a lot of these vaccines were driven or developed so quickly because of the support of AI-driven systems. So I think there's tremendous growth, tremendous opportunity, and it's probably the best place for AI-driven systems, in my opinion, going forward in the years to come.
Yeah, Dr. Borders. Paul, would you like to say something?
Yes, I did. And I think this is going to kind of come from all of what we've discussed so far, is how important it is to understand the domain. Because whether you're trying to look at MRI images, right, that's a very, very specific use case of image processing and pattern recognition. Facial is a completely different one. But so, or whether you're mining data, tabular data for how drugs are behaving, it's very, very, very different in each case. I think that the tools that are used, to Don's point, is that human beings are still by far the driver of AI systems. You use these underlying tools, like, for example, I do investigations where I use Python, and I write code on top of platforms that are out there. I don't think there is a platform that isn't generic first, and that is used by people to move the AI into the domain. That is so important to understand that the domain is really the focus, if that makes sense.
It does. All right, I'd like to thank all the speakers, and now we're running out of time on the question answers. I'd hand the thing back to the president to sort of conclude. Over to Mr. C. Paulson.
It was indeed a very scintillating yet educative session on the whole. Mr. Paul walked us through, navigated as to how the data analysis and how the AI is being used in various service industry. He mentioned about the loans, etc., to the banking sector. He also referred to a huge number of data which is not possible otherwise to be properly classified. So he referred to the clustering and classification of data with the AI. He also referred to the unbiased and objective analysis given by these machines. Mr. Don at length went into the investigating sector as to how the crime investigation as well as fraud detection can be used. AI can be used for fraud detection and crime detection. This is an area of my own interest and specialization also. So I am very thankful to Don that he says that in the end what he concluded was that human intelligence will not be replaced and cannot be replaced by AI. I'm thankful to him because at this stage of my age, I am happy that human intelligence ultimately will not be totally obliterated with the AI. He says it cannot be. And I agree with him. When he referred about the surveillance aspect, Mr. Rohit referred about the surveillance, that how millions of images are analyzed and given a sort of analysis as to who is walking and how. Here also, sir, I like to share with you that it is a very doubtful process. A man may be walking aggressively, yet he may be an army officer or a police officer. His gait, his gestures, his movement may be a little aggressive to the computer, but the computer may try to analyze it as one who is probably a radical element. So this sort of analysis is only possible either on a personal level or there may be some other techniques coming in passive time. I have experience of my own. When I raised the Rapid Action Force, I had to take people who had a little aggressive attitude. But by and large, this organization, The Rapid Action Force was meant more to give more human touch to the police. A lot of criticism came in the papers that the sea policing is taking some people who have got aggressive attitude. We got the analysis done in this country, and it was concluded that every human being must be a little aggressive also, so that he's able to shield himself, protect himself, and particularly a police officer, maybe of rapid action force, he has to be a little aggressive. But the question is how much percentage is aggression and how much percentage is only humane. So it's very difficult to do it with a machine, I feel, at this time. But I beg to go with most of the speaker that this AI is bringing a lot of revolution. The question is blind reliance on AI may be dangerous. That's what I conclude from my experience. AI is perhaps a very, very good servant, but will it be a dangerous master in times to come? If you depend totally on AI, it is a very good tool, it's a very good servant, it will serve you, but with the passage of time, it will become a dangerous master. The last point is, which I want to say, that human intelligence, I would call it, or human mind bandwidth is very, very big. Will the AI cover the entire bandwidth of human intelligence, human system? These are a few remarks which I wanted to make on the basis of deliberations given by 3 erudite speakers in this industry. I am really grateful to them, and I am so obliged also to the questioners. There were very, very intelligent questions coming from the ringside, and they have done wonderful. Kamya, can we have the banner for the next? So our next webinar is, try to make it clear, that is effective communication for success and happy life. I'll request all the delegates to mark it. It is not only a success that effective communication brings about, but also it may bring about happy life. Communication is all through, right from the beginning, a communication with friends, communication with your children, communication with your spouse, and communication in society. So communication and effective communication shall and can bring, not only bring about success and also happy life. Mark the word happy life, and let us see what the erudite speaker, we have 3 speakers for this, and all are masters in their own work. One is an army officer. They have all along been in communication. Other is from investigating industry. So they are all well versed in communication. And we are very, very hopeful that effective communication, success, and happy life, the subject of our webinar, will attract all of you to come over and join us in this webinar. And with these words, I once again like to thank all the erudite speakers and those who have attended this webinar. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Don. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rohit. And
Thank you.
President Sir. Just to mention, Leroy Cook is from the US and Sheila Ponuswamy is from Perth in Australia. And General Chachra would be from New Delhi in India. And thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and listening to the speakers today. I hope you had a lot to take away. And as we end the webinar, the sponsor was Premier Consulting and Investigations, and it was supported by Tag Scores, Premier Shield, HubSpot, and JMD Cargo.